Hey, welcome
Thanks.
everybody. Good morning, Mike Cushman, and good morning everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara this morning, live every weekday morning for the people and in the Niagara Falls area. All right, so welcome everybody, and well, I suppose St. Catharines is the Niagara Falls area. We accept those as well. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
and welcome to Niagara Falls, Ontario, the province that may soon start to be called Trump-ario if Trump thinks there's oil here.
yeah. And we'll be talking a bit about that further. Anyway, the court shut it down, but UCP renews its Alberta separatist bid. Basically, they introduced at the end of December. We didn't get to talk about it. They introduced a new Bill 14, which allows which got around the judge's ruling about the independence referendum, and that basically gives them. They're now going to be starting campaigning for a new separatist referendum.
Yeah. Well, originally the referendum was illegal.
Yeah.
Well, we've had referendums before, like we've had the referendum, the Quebec
Well, it's not that having a referendum was illegal. It's that having a referendum on the subject of separation was illegal.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant. But anyway, yeah, anybody can have a referendum on anything. But we've had a couple of separatist referendums in Quebec. We've had one of the big problems there was the question of separation, and I wonder if they're going to have the same problem in Alberta. In Quebec, they were very, very vague about the separatist question, making it sound as if you're going to get all the benefits of being a Canadian citizen if you separated.
Yeah.
So the people who designed the question there made it murky and made it unclear. And there was a fight between the two separatists. The guy that lost his leg, I can't even remember these guys' names anymore. I can picture them, but I can't remember the names offhand.
Okay. That's fine.
One guy lost his leg, and the other guy, anyway, was. But anyway, to make a long story short, we wonder if that's going to happen in Alberta too. Of course, Alberta has smarted under being ignored by the federal government for so long, and the federal government has paid its attention to the largest population groups in Canada, mostly Quebec and Ontario, and a little bit of Alberta, a little bit of BC, but they pretty much ignored Alberta, and they haven't been really friendly to Alberta and Alberta's designs. Well, Alberta's got really angry about that, and I don't blame them.
Yeah.
All this time, many years.
Well, I understand the anger. Yeah.
I've been wondering, if you keep doing what you're doing to Alberta, they're gonna try to become independent. Now the question is, are they going to become independent, or are they going to be like Texas? Texas got its independence, and 2 years later joined the United States. Are they going to do something like that?
Yeah. And the thing is, I'm not so sure it's really in Alberta's best interest to be the 51st state.
No, it probably isn't. It's probably in Alberta's interest to stay in Canada. However, you saw what happened in Brexit, where a lot of nationalism, they shot themselves in the foot economically.
Yeah, they did.
So a lot of British.
Absolutely, they did.
Yeah.
Every problem that UK faces right now was something that I did predict actually prior to the Brexit vote, and in fact, actually, right now in Britain, there's a campaign for a rejoin vote.
Well, their economy was shrank by 20%. One of the reasons I think Mark Carney was there. Don't get me don't quote me on this because I don't know for sure, but I think one of the reasons why Mark Carney was brought in was to help stabilize the economy when it shrank by 20% because of the exit of Brexit. Exit of Brexit.
Because of Brexit, yeah. And that's part of the big problem that Britain faces. Because they've got they've got a weak economy anyway. It's on its own, Britain's economy is not what it used to be. It's not, Britain boasts about being being a great empire, etc., and it is not that anymore. Hasn't been since the Second World War, if we're honest about it. We may have faked it till the 60s and 70s, but it never has been since the end of the Second World War, and never went into the post Second World War boom with any form of economic advance. It's always paying back old debts. Alberta, does Alberta face the same thing? Potentially. I don't know what its debt situation is like.
Well, I think Alberta's probably, got its stuff together pretty quick. But basically, Alberta has said, and all along, that we have a window in order to exploit our resources. We want to exploit. We can. The whole world can scream. We can get rid of carbon fuels all they want, but the fact is, the matter is, the world needs carbon fuels and will need carbon fuels at least for 50 more years. I don't really see a reduction in the need of carbon fuels in the next 50 years. And Alberta saying, well, let us get a piece of that pie. Let us start doing that. Now, the Liberal government up until now, being swayed by our environmental arguments, said, okay, well, we got to turn away from carbon produced stuff. And that means we got to reduce the amount of oil we make in Alberta, which is dumb because so much of the tax revenue came from oil. It's kind of really self-defeating there. But I mean, politicians are looking for votes. They don't always make sense. So what's happened with the Carney government's come in and says, well, all the old liberal ideas are dumb as can be, and we agree with Alberta. We'll have to exploit your resources as best we can until we can. I mean, we haven't lost sight of the green economy, but that's just not possible now. Let's make some money on the oil we have.
Yeah. And Mike is saying that if we refine our own oil, it would sure help us and help Canada keep Alberta.
Yeah, another impulse to join the U.S. or become independent is the fact that the United States just took over Venezuela, which means they will put in their own Shah, their own puppet dictator, and produce oil and sell it. Trump says we're going to produce the oil and we're going to sell it. We're going to sell it worldwide. We'll sell it to China. We'll sell it anywhere else they want it. In other words, it's going to be their own fiefdom, their own oil fiefdom. Basically, I don't know how he's going to pull that off, but basically what they're going to do is put in some puppets, and those puppets will cooperate with the United States. And perhaps, I don't know, maybe hopefully there will be a spinoff for the average Venezuelan people, but that puts pressure on Canada, because that heavy crude that's going to come up, it's going to compete with Canadian heavy crude. And if the U.S. is the ones that are the ones that are saying how much it's going to cost, guess who's going to get the big discount? The U.S. The refineries in the U.S. are going to get the big discount because they're going to tell the Venezuelans, you're going to produce X amount of oil and you're going to sell it to us for X amount of price. That's it. You got no choice.
Well, I guess
we'll sell it to ourselves
is that if oil, as Alberta controls the oil supply, both in Canada and pipeline to north to pipelines either to the rest of Canada or to the US. That may actually cause people to pay more attention to Alberta, I guess.
this will push any kind of pipeline that we have to sell oil to Asia. I think that's probably our best source of where our oil is going to go. In Alberta, I don't know how this is going to factor in, but these are all little facts and circumstances that will factor into some of what Alberta citizens will vote on. Many of them, of course, are voting because they could probably see themselves being a very wealthy province if they just unshackle themselves from Canada. But remember, Alberta has to remember that when things were bad back in the 80s and when oil prices fell and so on, where did they get the backing from? They got the backing from the rest of Canada.
Yeah. But again, okay, so former Conservative Deputy Leader Thomas Sudzic, Lukasik, has basically been saying the Premier is bending over backwards to facilitate the separation referendum. Basically, Lukasik has actually led the successful Alberta Forever Canada petition drive. And that petition basically, which was a pro-Canadian referendum position, basically garnered 483 Albertans signatures when they last took when they were last creating this pro-Canada referendum.
Well, I don't know.
Which is well above what the I think it's 177,000 that they need to get the referendum going.
Well, I think just as my own particular opinion, I think the Albertans should have every opportunity to vote on whether to stay or go from Canada.
I'm not denying that.
I will say this, that as long as they're fully aware of all the facts, you don't want them to make an emotional decision based on what's just happened in the last couple of months or last couple of years.
And the other factor that I don't think anybody in Alberta is considering is treaty land.
I'm sure they have, because that's going to be all part of it. That's going to be all part of the campaign. Is treaty land, Treaty Area 6, Treaty Area 8, all that stuff. Right? Yeah. So that'll all be part of the referendum, and the campaign for it, for or against it, will be stuff like that. I don't think they've disregarded that. I think that's glaringly evident.
Well, I think you and I it is, because we look at things in the much more broader perspective. But many of the people who are, many of the pro-separatist Albertans have been like, well, we will go irrespective of the treaty.
Have they actually said that?
That's what I've heard. Yes. Okay. We'll be slicing our land off, and the treaty will not apply.
Yeah, well, there's where the legality comes in, because the treaties were signed with the British government, and then of course that's being turned over to the Canadian government. So it's the federal government they have the treaties with. They may have some certain agreements with the Alberta or the BC or any different provincial governments, but the treaties, the main treaties, are a federal thing. That's could be a problem. That was a problem when the Quebec referendum too. There was a lot of treaty land in Quebec, in northern Quebec, and the indigenous people said that we made our treaty with Canada. We didn't make it with Quebec. So if we decide to stay in Canada, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah,
and so that was a problem for
Quebec.
But
for Alberta, that's basically about something like 2/3 of all its land is treaty land.
Yeah. So anyway, whatever, I don't know how they're going to adapt to that. I'm sure they'll probably, whoever has the referendum or whatever, it's not likely they're going to win the referendum, but if they do, then it will be a whole legal sort of scramble. So Alberta, if they decide to leave, they may be only able to take a third of the province with them, whatever the legal things that the Indigenous people have with the federal government.
Yeah.
So we'll see about that. That's something we saw coming, though. I don't understand why the Liberal government kept irritating the West, particularly when it was a source of so much revenue.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But when when they tried to thump their chest and do the environmental thing, and I'm good with the environmental progress, but I don't really want to see people lose their jobs just for the sake of somebody that lives in a gated community who says, "Oh, we should have more trees," and oil bad, but they still drive around in an SUV. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. And it's easy to be a hypocrite, isn't it, in that regard?
Well, it surely is, because a lot of the gated community type people who are environmentalists are the ones that are driving around in big boats. They're the ones taking the big trips that consume fuel. And then when they get there, then they eat organically. So they take a plane to some place and they, and then they eat organically and locally there and think they're doing something environmental. Meanwhile, you just took a big plane to get there, and you took a big bus or a truck to get to where you're going, and that kind of thing. So there's all kinds of duplicity when it comes to environmental stuff. Let's put it this way. Yeah, we're going to have to cut out oil and gas and see how we can change our change the environment the best we can. But it is very, very clear that the world will be using oil for a very long time. And to get back to Alberta might like it because of independence, and then tie in with the U.S. because the U.S. has pretty much made it very clear that it will not develop alternate sources of power. It will rely completely on carbon fuels. Now that they have Venezuela, their own vast sources of carbon fuels, and they have as much of ours as they want, they can now dominate the world in carbon fuels and develop their technologies and everything along those lines. Whereas a place like China has diversified a lot because it doesn't have its own oil, or not much of it. It's got coal. It burns a lot of that, but that's unsustainable. So China has developed a lot of alternate sources of energy, wind, solar, and all that. The United States has pretty well pulled a pin on all that, under Trump at least, and gone completely and totally with carbon fuels.
Yeah.
That they've just turned their back completely on the environmental thing and are going to develop their carbon economy.
Yeah.
And they're going to be the most reliant on carbon, but that it's not going to be that they're most reliant, but they're going to develop their economy along the lines that they're going to have ample supplies of cheap power, cheap carbon fuel.
Yeah.
Whether it comes from Venezuela, whether it comes from Canada, whether it comes from Mexico, or wherever it comes from, the fact that they've already grabbed Venezuela means that they have generation after generation control over vast amount of the world oil supply. If the American companies go in there and do what Trump says they'll do, they'll be producing incredible amounts of oil for the world market, and the U.S. will be reaping the rewards for that.
Yeah, and it will be
hopefully the Venezuelans will get something out of it, but who knows?
But it will be controlled by U.S. companies.
Yeah, they're the ones, and the U.S. will reap the rewards.
And you see, Trump.
They have to be careful. They can't do what they can't put a Shah in like they did in Iran. That lasted for 25 years. That was about oil too.
Yeah.
They put the Shah in there so they could control the oil.
again, the US doesn't need to do the same for Alberta, because Alberta, is happy to do that on their own.
Yeah,
If
it's
a
the
referendum
association Alberta will have with the United States, which they probably see as their prime market. If they get independence, then they will be more dependent on the United States than they are now.
Yeah.
If they get their independence.
Yeah, if they got their independence, that would be the path. So you wouldn't actually need to join the United States. They would get what they wanted without.
Yeah, but they'd have to do everything the United States tells them to do. Like they may have independence on paper only, but the states will demand the price of oil, what it's going to be. They'll demand this and that from Alberta. Alberta will not be able to. Alberta will not be able to. If they join the United States, that's something different. But if they are independent, then their boss is going to be the United States. I don't know if they fully see that right now.
I don't know.
If they become independent, they're going to have one market, basically one main market, and that's going to be the United States. And that means the United States will call it all the shots in Alberta.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. Baldinelli is saying Poilievre will survive the leadership review. Of course, he would have to say that because he's a Conservative MP, and he's saying, he would have to, at least in public, support his leader. At the moment, basically, according to Angus Reid Institute, polling is showing that actually 58% of Canadian voters want Poilievre to stay, down from 68% in August. And among the parties most committed, the definites are saying 92% favour him and 75% want him to remain leader.
I think that I'm not so sure that all the Conservatives have all that much confidence in Pierre Poilievre right now. He was a very clear, dynamic leader prior to Carney coming into the situation, and he lost a lot of his luster once Trudeau left, because his power was based on Trudeau's lack of power. Basically, Trudeau was just fumbling away there. His government was fumbling away, and he was an easy mark. Along comes Carney, and he looks a lot more like a professional. And Pierre Poilievre couldn't use the character assassination thing he used on Trudeau.
Yeah, and absolutely. But there's a difference here. We're actually going to be talking about, the leadership review that's going to happen over the next couple of weeks is going to be by committed Conservatives, the people who are party members, and not by members of the public. So about what I gave there was actually about the public view. 58% of recent Conservative voters want Poilievre to stay. That's a public view, not a Conservative party view.
I believe it's similar to the party, although Poilievre is probably not as popular among his party as the public, among the public. Although Poilievre did grow the party quite a bit in membership in recent years.
Yeah.
So I would think the reason why Poilievre will keep his job is there's no one else to take it.
That actually is a crucial factor, because who else, irrespective of whether you like what they're saying or not, who else is a shining star in the Conservative Party right now?
There isn't. Plus, who wants to take on Carney? Carney is showing a huge amount of popularity in a difficult time. And who wants to take on Carney? Poilievre made the mistake of treating Carney like Trudeau he got his, and it didn't work very well for him.
Yep.
But you get the idea that Poilievre may learn learn as he goes, and he is a good politician. And if something happens and the Liberals become very unpopular for some reason, and there's an election, you want a seasoned person in that office, and that would be Poilievre. But who is in the party to take his place? No one. They've had failed leader after failed leader.
Yeah, they have.
In election after election.
Well, in fact, actually, I would say
Poilievre is probably still their best bet.
Yeah, I would say that unfortunately the Conservatives gave up on Erin O'Toole too quickly. Right, Andrew Scheer was a waste of time, but they gave up on Erin O'Toole too quickly. I think that he would have been a much better leader in some respects than Poilievre, but it's just my view. Where we sit right now is Angus Reid analyzes is looking at the CPC vote, and they're saying basically 27% of Canadians identify as right wing, whereas 38% identify as centrist, and that is that impacts the demographic about the Conservative Party. 64% of centrists view Poilievre unfavorably, and 63% say he should be replaced. So the centrist view, but of course 38%. That's 38% of the Canadian of the Conservative vote.
We'll see. Remember, a lot of we've had a few leaders quit or walk across the floor on the Conservatives.
Yeah.
And we don't, and the Conservatives really haven't come up with anything right now, because basically there's nothing new the Conservatives come up with, basically because Carney's just stole them. He's taken all their talking points, and the Conservatives have gone, we should be doing this, we should be doing that, we should be getting rid of the carbon tax and all that. That's exactly what Carney's been doing. He's been talking to Alberta. He's been doing exactly the opposite that the Liberal government has done with Alberta before. He's reached out his hand, trying to make some deals, some pipelines, et cetera, et cetera. So who, number one, I'll just repeat that, who in the Conservative Party thinks they can beat Carney right now?
Yeah.
No.
Nobody.
The one guy they do have with experience is Poilievre, and there's no one else stepping up. Yeah. So he's going to get the job, whether or not the other Conservatives like it or not. So we can see Poilievre in that seat. We can't. There may be an election coming up. Who knows? Who knows? I'm not so sure that it was such a close call with a no confidence vote on the budget, this huge budget that Carney came up with, which would have been totally unacceptable. And this is another reason why you might think that it's going to be tough to go after a leader like Carney, face off against one like that, because he got an enormous deficit budget passed, which would have just been absolutely verboten for anyone else at any other time. But he manages to get this huge deficit budget passed, which somehow got the confidence of enough people to do that. So that he has leadership qualities. If he's going to be able to convince everybody that an enormous deficit budget is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other question though is, when you put it back to the Conservatives, I think that we the situation really is that Poilievre actually has probably enough support. It's been waning a bit within the Conservative Party. We've had one MP cross the floor, one MP resign, but that matches the Freeland resignation, if you like, and we can talk about Freeland later on. but also what we're seeing within the Conservative Party is, I think that you will probably see him hang on, but not. I've seen a few interviews with Conservative pundits over the last since the last election, and back last summer, I think there was a lot of support within the Conservatives to say that Poilievre will walk away with a handsome majority in the leadership review in January. They were not even concerned about it. Now, Poilievre supporters are much more concerned.
Yeah, it's very clear that Poilievre had some very good successes with the party, originally speaking. Although the problem is they say he's too much of a draconian leader, too much of a micromanager, that kind of thing. That's the kind of things I hear. But he did shape up the party. He got a ship shape, and he got all kinds more conservative party members signed on throughout his tenure. And let's face it, even though he lost his own seat and lost the election, they got more seats than they ever have for a very long time. So how do you measure success? So you have to look at the positives there if you're the Conservatives. You know, you ran into a buzzsaw when a super talented guy happened to be able to take over for a less than talented guy in the party opposite. That upset the apple cart completely. When you got a guy like Carney come in and he's so centrist, you don't know whether he's liberal or conservative sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, and he's practical. Like he does practical things. So
well,
how are you gonna beat a guy like that? So like Poilievre has to really change his tact. So you have what I was saying. He's had a fair amount of positives in an otherwise what looks to be a disaster is actually full of lots of little positives. They increased the party size, increased the amount of seats in Parliament, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. And okay, Mike makes the point, but then Mike's a bit of an NDPer anyway. Poilievre's political style is already old, is what Mike is saying.
Yeah, that I agree with him there. He has to change. He has to change.
Yeah. Right. And Poilievre has literally been on top of the actual consideration of votes since he became head of the party, and that's true as well. So the question here is, how is Poilievre developing? Because it seems like he isn't.
Yeah, that could be a fair analysis, but how much time he's got to consolidate his power within the Conservative Party, and then they got to move forward, and they have to change the tack. So I don't know. Who else is capable of doing any of that?
Yeah,
and Poilievre definitely has to change. So does the Conservative government. The Conservative Party have to figure out ways of moving forward. They got to quit their infighting, consolidate their ideas, and move on them. But that old-fashioned way that he did things, which was very, very amusing when he was cutting up Trudeau every day in Parliament. I enjoyed that completely, but because it was amusing and the government just looked so stupid, you know. But that's over now. That won't work. You got to come up with real ideas saying why what is good and what is bad, and convince us, the Canadian people, why you have a better idea.
Yeah, and it was easy to make that point against Trudeau, but Carney's a whole different type of style of leadership. Carney's a whole different picture. And for the Conservatives to beat Carney, he's shown that he turned the Liberals around massively, exactly as you said, and that matters a lot.
He says, "Look, we're not going to be flakes anymore. We're not going to be woke flakes anymore. We're going to be practical, do our job politicians." and what did the party do? They just come along, right? They just fell in line.
Yeah, and in fact, the fact that Poilievre lost his own seat was actually must have been a nightmare for him, right? And okay, it's easy for opposition people to actually pick upon Poilievre and target an individual seat. It's a lot harder to actually keep that in the longer run. And he got back in handsomely, albeit not in his his traditional territory. Now, has he continued to be an effective leader for the Conservatives? That's up for question. And I think the betrayals, and there's, from what I've been hearing, there's at least 6 more in the wings about wanting to step down, wanting to move away from the Conservatives in some way.
Thing is, if the Conservatives have somebody better, they better start putting them up right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I agree. Because, in fact, actually, any leadership review has got to be thinking about who the alternative is. And it's true that probably a month before we saw that the question about Carney, we didn't even know Carney was a potential candidate for the Liberals, right?
Yeah, it was always circulating in the ether, though. It was,
yes.
As a matter of fact, Trudeau shot himself in the foot when he was going to get rid of Freeland and put Carney in her place as a last-ditch measure to bring popularity back to his party. Carney wisely turned that down, but I don't think I think it was very clear to him, probably even a year before the collapse of the Liberal Party, that he would be called upon.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So Randy West made the point. Carney is a whole lot of nothing going on. If you believe for 1 minute the world is going to get better under Carney, you're foolish, right?
You can say that about every political leader ever. I don't know. Can you say that about Poilievre? If Poilievre was the leader, was anything going to get any better? I saw an interview with Jean Chrétien the other day, and he led Canada during a certain solid part of our period there. When we, but did Canada get any better under his? Yeah, maybe, probably, but you can. As far as Carney goes, I mean, I don't think he's tested yet. He has a bunch of ideas that he wants to implement. He sees clearly the existential threat from Trump. He sees clearly that he's learned his lesson. Canada's learned the lesson that we cannot rely on the United States. And Carney's probably the best guy to go ahead with that because he understands business. He's a self-made millionaire. So he came from a middle-class family, and he's a multi-millionaire right now, and plus he was the director of the Bank of England and director of the Bank of Canada, so he's got more chops than the average politician.
Yes, he has, but the self-made millionaire doesn't mean anything when it comes to actually putting into power and actually making changes for the country.
I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from being a self-made millionaire to economy. You have to understand the economy to be a self-made millionaire.
Yeah, but the same argument about self-made millionaire or self-made billionaire can be argued south of the border.
That guy was not a self-made billionaire. He got all his dad's money. In fact, he I don't know how many, he had 5 bankruptcies where he walked away, and
I thought it was a lot more than that. He bankrupted a lot of firms during his time.
Yeah, and
Six is what they're saying officially, but I believe on the first term I heard news, I heard that it was 30 odd companies that he basically took over and bankrupted in order to reestablish them.
Yeah, all those business concerns have failed, and then he just licensed his name. He licensed his name to Trump Steaks. He licensed his name to Trump Airlines and all that. So he lost. His business concerns were big losses, and then he just started selling his name. And now he's getting big money from Doha and the big oil barons feeding him all kinds of money because they want his attention. Make sure his sons are nice and wealthy, and because that's the way they work. And you worked in the Middle East, that's how it works in the Middle East, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You get to the family at the top, and you start feeding them with compliments and money, and so that they will view you favorably. And that seems to have happened quite well with the big oil countries like Doha and Saudi. And this is a guy we can bribe. This is somebody we can understand, But as far as Carney's rise to business, he's got the smarts to do that. Poilievre has been a career politician. That's both good and bad. So he understands politics. He understands people in politics. He understands bureaucracies, that kind of thing. But is he that well placed economically? He would have to hire a guy like Carney to be his economist, to run the economy, that kind of thing. But so I don't know. Yeah. So Randy West saying, if you think any miracles are going to happen because Carney's in, you're dreaming. But on the other hand, if you think a huge disaster is going to happen because he's in, or nothing at all is going to happen, that I don't think that's viable either. I don't know if Pierre Poilievre can change anything at all. He does not seem to be equipped at this particular time to take on somebody with the credentials.
And it's always the grass is always greener on the other side. Let's be honest, Dave.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I would like to see a very strong conservative leader. I would like to see a very strong NDP leader. I definitely would like to see, but I would also like to see all three leaders of our main parties to be practical men first and idealists second. They're the ideals of conservatism and the ideals of liberalism or NDP. But what I want first and foremost out of every leader is somebody practical, somebody that knows that a street has to be paved and that oil has to come out of the ground, whether you like it or not. It has to come out of the ground, and it has to pay people salaries, and it has to be sold in a market, that kind of thing. The ideals of government have to be second to the practicality of government. And I don't think that's what we've seen in the last few years. And that's what we're beginning to see now. And if Poilievre wants to learn a lesson or two, he has to get down to the brass tacks and stop whining about liberals and start getting on to how he will more practically run the country, or the conservatives will. If he does that, then maybe he'll get more attention.
Okay. Before we move on, let's remind everybody to like and follow us on Facebook, particularly on the Talking Niagara page, and also to like and subscribe on YouTube and on my page on YouTube, and that's where you'll find the show on YouTube. All right. Okay, one more comment before we move on and stand up for. Okay, so how do the rich get rich? By being in the house for all his life and stand up for their people he sees. That's what's going on. That's what Betty's saying. And billions in carbon taxes that are never spent on saving the environment gets you where? Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Randy. It
Yeah,
didn't get us anywhere.
I would like to see. I would like to see where those dollars go for sure.
Yeah, they didn't go anywhere. All right, moving on.
Well, the carbon tax was supposed to be an impediment,
Yeah,
a kind of thing that resisted. Like, I mean, it just was stupid on the face of
yeah,
it.
yeah,
It's not there now anyway. So
yeah. All right, Freeland is now accepting a role advising Ukraine's Zelensky.
yeah, this is interesting. It didn't really surprise me, but this is Freeland has accepted a role as a kind of a consultant to the Ukrainian economy. Zelensky says that the treaty is 90% done, which makes it, and the fact that he's asking Freeland to come in and help him rebuild the economy of the Ukraine, which gives you an indication that he has some confidence that the war is going to be over fairly soon. The shooting will stop.
I think ultimately the Trump plan, even though he might not like it, the Trump plan is a plan that is practical, and it's going to end up probably being something like the Trump plan will be adopted, whether we like it or not.
It's hard to say. Like, Trump could not do what he said he was going to do. He said he was going to just make a few phone calls and the war would end.
Yeah.
But his buddy Putin would not play ball. That embarrassed Trump very bad. So he started putting pressure on Zelensky. I want this war to end. I look bad because I haven't been able to do it. So guess what? You're the one that's going to give up. And Zelensky said, no, I'm not going to be the one that gives up. So now Trump was in a real tight spot. He tried to bully Zelensky. It didn't work. He couldn't appease Putin in any way. So right now, if he plays his cards right, he'll play hardball with Putin enough for the war to end. That means that Ukraine will lose part of its territory, the Crimea and part of its territory. Putin will have to play ball fairly soon because his economy has got to be pretty much in the shambles right now. Plus the fact that he's lost hundreds of thousands of troops, apparently. So that can't be helping them out any. Yeah. And plus, they can get his oil back on the market, that kind of thing. Well, so basically, what it looks like is Zelensky has some sort of confidence that the war is going to end, and he's brought in Chrystia Freeland to help rebuild the economy once that's done. Yeah, she is a very experienced economist, having done that work for the Canadian government. So her input would help very much. And she's got Ukrainian roots. We
knew that anyway. We knew that from before because when she was making speeches in Parliament during the early days of the Ukraine war, she made that clear.
Yes. So she's a Westerner with Ukrainian ancestry. It's a good look. Plus, she's doing it for free. This is a non-paid position, so that comes up pretty good too. Her seat will have to be replaced.
I'm not entirely sure how much of free is really free.
Well, I imagine
there will be expenses with that trip, and she'll, every time she goes to the Ukraine, there will be expenses associated with it, which she will get paid.
Well, the Ukrainian government will probably put her on the Ukrainian Airlines for free. They'll probably put her up and give her hotel digs for free and probably feed her. But they won't give her a salary. That's what she's saying. Like, I don't know what kind of arrangements she's made there, but she's offered her services without non-paid services. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that they'll find accommodations for her, find food for her, find transportation for her, but they won't pay her a salary.
Oh, I read all of that, but kind of where I sit right now with a lot of free is that that supposedly Trump does his job for free. He doesn't get paid by the US as president of the US. I don't believe it. I really do not believe it. I believe he's making more money out of the US than his salary would be.
Oh, he's making well, you can see the cryptocurrencies and the Trump medals and all kinds of other things he's got going on there. He's making all kinds of money, but he's turning down the salary of president of the USA and taking in money from Doha or Saudi Arabia or something else like that. So his family's becoming quite rich. The Republicans are very happy to look the other way on that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
They were outraged by Biden and his son's machinations in Ukraine. They freaked right out, but it's okay if Trump does
it. Yeah. Well, it's nice to be able to afford to do that, right?
Yeah.
You and I couldn't. All right. Okay, so moving on. Ford says he's going to follow through on his threats against Crown Royal by removing it from the LCBO shelves. LTBO, what the heck is one of them?
Yes. Do you think that's the right thing to do?
I don't believe, I've always been opposed to the removal of the Tennessee whiskey, Jim Beam and all the like. I was opposed to that removal from the start because many of those companies, they're not super rich, conglomerates that can afford to go through a sustained spell of loss.
Well, I don't know how that factors in.
I think it's the wrong. If you were going to take American booze out of the LCBO, you do so by when it's sold. It's sold. We're not buying any more.
Okay. That aside, what about Crown Royal? Crown Royal makes this whiskey right here in Ontario.
Crown Royal is basically locally made. But what they were going to be doing is they were entering into a partnership with an American organization that was allowing them to bolster how they made Crown Royal. So it was an add-on to Crown Royal.
They were going to Crown Royal is made in Ontario. Wasn't going to change. What they were going to do is they're going to take the bottling plant and put it in the United States, probably in a way to fight back on the tariff thing. So they can actually say at least it was bottled in the U.S., it brought a job to the U.S., whatever. But whatever, they say that they are going to close down the bottling facility, open one in the States to make better use of the U.S. market. The Ontario government's not buying that, and neither is the union. Yeah. They're not buying that at all.
Oh, I know.
Now, however, do you now put at risk the jobs of the people who are making or brewing or distilling Crown Royal? They're still in Ontario. Okay, so that means Crown Royal will be sold less in Ontario. Do you really want to put the jobs of those distillers at risk just because the company is moving the bottling plant out of Ontario? Because if you take Crown Royal off the shelves, that means less Crown Royal will be purchased here in Ontario, which might put pressure on the company to lay off people in the distillery.
My question is that I can see the sense in opening up a US bottling plant, but I also see the sense in it being a split decision. So when you're making whiskey that's going to be sold in Canada, you bottle it in Canada, not in the US.
Yeah.
And the American stuff gets bottled in the US.
You could do that, I guess. But I don't know if it would make economic sense. So you're going to lose 200 jobs out of this bottling plant, and it's going to close February 28th, no matter what the government's doing. Yeah. And Doug Ford's going to say, all right, no more Crown Royal on the shelves. Yeah. Right. So you don't you don't do it here, you don't get to stay. I think he's learning from Trump actually in his bully boy tactics. But on the other hand, what I see is I think that's unfortunate. I don't think that should happen. But does it make sense then to take Crown Royal and take it off the shelves and sell less of it in Ontario? When you do that, you sell less of it. That means there's going to be pressure on the distillery to reduce the amount of employees at the distillery. Is that such a good thing? Do you want to hurt Crown Royal completely? No, it's part of a conglomerate now, of course. There's a bunch of different things that this company brews. Smirnoff is one. I think Guinness is I don't know what they do with Guinness. They must make the Canadian version of Guinness. There's a couple out. There's a San Giulio or something like that. So there's a bunch of different liquors they make. So they're an international conglomerate. Of course, international conglomerates could care less about the divisions of political divisions and boundaries of that kind. They're just going to find places where it's the easiest or cheapest, whatever they have to do. So I don't know if this is going to work. It's going to work.
To be quite honest, I'm not a fan of Crown Royal whiskey, but that doesn't mean to say it shouldn't be on the shelves of the LCBO. I think it should. Now, here's the thing. There's an irony here. Doug Ford's wanting to actually have everybody selling booze. My local store has about a third of its shelf space is selling booze. Not sure that was the right thing for a convenience store to do, but
in your neighborhood, yes. In your neighborhood, it means money.
No, I don't think it's a wise thing for any convenience store to be, obviously from the convenience store viewpoint, I think it's, if you're owning a convenience store, absolutely you do. But I think from the societal viewpoint, convenience stores are the wrong places to put liquor into. That's a different argument, though.
I don't know. There's no liquor. There's no liquor in your convenience store. There's only beer and wine.
Well, that said, should there be liquor in the same stores?
No.
Right?
No.
Yeah. Well, this is where I would say absolutely 100% agree with you. And the reason I agree with you is because we should not be selling beer and wine in convenience stores either. They should be sold in independent liquor stores, right? And only in independent liquor stores. Because I think the liquor store owners will have the training and understanding about the market, about the beer, wine, and other markets as well.
Well, it's a conservative ideology, basically, that you open the market as much as you can. Yeah. So Ford, being a conservative, sees business opportunities and the growth opportunities being stifled. If the company wants to sell its wine or beer in a variety of different places, and the conservatives think, what's the difference if they sell it here or they sell it there? Anyone should be able to make money selling beer or wine like anybody else. So that's the conservative idealism coming in. That's really funny to me, because in years past, conservatives would be the ones that wanted to keep alcohol in specific stores. So in conservative moral wise, conservative morals would be to keep liquor and alcohol more boxed in and sold in specific stores like it used to be. But the conservative economic view is to allow anybody to sell whatever they should be, to be free to be able to sell it to make profit.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. If you had come back to Ontario in 1960 and said that the conservatives want beer and wine sold in grocery stores and everything, they'd flip out. They would say
probably
that's possible, but
probably, yeah. But you see, I'm very much for the independent seller. I'm very much for breaking the monopoly of the LCBO and the beer store.
well, that's where the conservatives are coming in. They didn't want that monopoly. They figured they should make it more of a freer market.
Yeah,
that is the conservative idea of economy. Now, it's not the social conservative. I'm pretty sure that their support among the religious people, conservative religious people, more often vote for conservatives, or like religious people most likely go out for conservatives. I think they were probably appalled by the fact that alcohol was being put in the corner stores. That's something that they were probably against. So the social conservative part of the Conservative Party, that which is socially conservative, would not have approved. But the economic conservatives, who think that get the regulations off of and the monopolies out of the marketplace, and keep competition open. So
okay, so here's a question for you. Is Crown Royal just a local agent for Diageo, or are they owned by Diageo?
I think they're one of the ones that is owned by them. These are all conglomerates nowadays. It's very, very it's very unlikely that any one company is a solitary company anymore.
Yeah.
They're all owned by conglomerates.
Because at the end of the day, Diageo brings a lot to LCBO. Things like Guinness, Smirnoff, Johnny Walker, Captain Morgan. These are global names in the liquor industry, in that market.
Yeah. And they bought Crown Royal somewhere along the line to add to their, but
Crown Royal doesn't necessarily, internationally, Crown Royal doesn't necessarily have the same fame, but Crown Royal is still an important, is important locally.
Look, they would make it in India if they could get away with it. You know what I mean? If they, they know that they could take Crown Royal and Johnny Walker and make them in some poor province in India and make huge profit from it. They know they couldn't get away with it when they sold it, though, because no one would buy it. It doesn't come from Canada, or it doesn't come from Scotland, So that part of it wouldn't work for them. But they could take the bottling and every other aspect of it and go somewhere where it's cheaper to do that.
Yeah.
In this particular case, they think if they change their bottling, they can go down to the United States and get a bunch of Mexicans to work in their factory, and for a bag of beans a week. And I think that's what they're kind of thinking. The labor is a lot cheaper down there, the facilities. I remember once going hitchhiking down to Boston, and there was a huge plastic factory I was in one night because we were visiting the security guard of that building. And he let us in, and we just kind of hung out there for a while. It was empty, but the whole place was all Puerto Ricans. They were all illegals. The whole place was run by that, and that's what made. So I think it's probably the same thing in the States there. They're going to put up a bottling plant. They don't have to worry about a union. They don't have to worry about proper benefits. They don't have to worry about proper retirement funds or anything of that kind. They can just fill it up with illegals, and away you go.
Yeah. All right. I think we're going to have to call it quits at that point.
Yes. Anyway, without further ado, I bid you adieu. I say, don't forget Gaza. It's going to get pushed to the back of the newspaper, so to speak, because of invasions of Venezuela and possible invasions of Greenland, and Epstein files. Those things are all going to push it off.
Well, I think the Epstein files was, Venezuela is to hide the Epstein files.
Well, I'm not sure if it was there specifically to do that, but it was good timing. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's about smoke and mirrors with Mr. Trump.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But
You're not seeing what's in this hand because you're seeing because I'm showing you this hand, right?
yeah, well, he told everybody, okay, if you have to release the files, find all the stuff on Democrats first and dump that on them.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so I think we can call it quits at that point. And Dave?
Okay, without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace, everyone.
Yeah.